So you mentioned at this point you've got you've taken a company public, you've kind of raised some capital some different ways. So I'm just curious to get an overview of where does Atypical fit in, and is that the entity that's been taken public, and kind of what are we buying into?
So Atypical Digital is not public. This is a private company that I'm working on now. My previous company, 60 Global Technologies, has been taken public, and it was through a reverse merger that didn't work out.
Tejune, you mentioned acquisition, a roll-up strategy. Is that part of what the money would be used for, is to go into other markets, acquire successful small firms, bring them into your structure?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can elaborate a little bit on that as well. I think that, as we all know, doing an acquisition strategy is it's a very good strategy. I've been doing this for about 3.5, 4 years now. And it's interesting because the companies that we acquire are in this interesting zone. They're too small to be big, and they're too big to be small, meaning that it's harder for them to get financing because this is all professional services. There's no hard assets. There's no inventory, factors, trailers, real estate, whatever it is. So the primary asset are really your customers. So our acquisition strategy, my corporate development team, has been really to go out there, identifying companies that are established, that have employees, good customers, that we can get at a decent deal, meaning that we pay between 4 to 6 times EBITDA. We have an earn-out period. We use both cash and stock, and we align our interests with the founder of the company as well. And what's interesting that's worked well for us is going after companies in other countries, for example, in Peru, Colombia, Uruguay, Costa Rica, and even Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia, Malaysia. Singapore is a bit pricey, but all these different kind of markets, because there's a huge amount of talent. The cost of labor is a lot less. We get the labor arbitrage, and they have great customers. They have Domino's, they have Burger King, they have Maserati, BMW, they have a good employee base. So we've been able to acquire these companies and bring them into the fold, and then you get economies of scale in terms of negotiation around IT, all the shared services, IT, finance, HR.
Where are you sourcing deals?
As many ways as we can. What I found is going with a broker is pretty costly, because then the interests are also not aligned. Typically you're paying a commission on what the sale price is. So a lot of it is just through word of mouth, through various networks, whether it's EO, YPO, it could be through Inc. 500 lists, just finding high growth, high potential companies that have kind of reached their max. And again, I'm not looking for people that want to just sell for all cash and ride off to the sunset. I'm looking for other leaders that want to be part of an up and coming company, because the larger agencies such as WPP, I mean, there's an article just today on how WPP is falling apart. So the whole creative agency of record is not working. That's broken, because what's the ROI on that? And I think traditional marketing campaigns are not working. As you also heard, every single person that was up here was talking about digital marketing. The last gentleman, he was talking about how he needs an e-commerce site. Guess what? We can help with that. The other individual said, well, we want a presence. So there's a huge market, and whether or not they fit within our customer profile of what we're looking for, that's a different question. But the need is there, and that's what we're filling.
And I'm curious about the deal structures. What are the deal structures looking like? Obviously, you want to keep the leaders on board.
You're talking about the acquisitions or
the
acquisitions? Acquisitions. So typically we'll do evaluation, say, listen, I mean, based on their profitability, we want to first identify the companies that make sense to acquire, meaning that they're established, they're successful, there's a CEO that's, from a culture perspective, they're learning, they want to grow, and a culture also with the people as well. And then we also talk to the individuals as well. And I think one of it's extremely important that the people and the talent, that's what our human capital is really what our assets are. So we have to find really good people, and more stressing even in this space specifically. So what does that mean? Our culture has to be really number one, our people have to be number one, and that includes our acquisition targets as well. So why do they love working where they work? So then I looked at, well, how can we build a great culture? And being the political climate it is in the States today, it's also very hard to work in the States and come in. But if we actually own them as subsidiaries, now they get an L1 visa, they can actually travel to the States. So imagine if I'm buying these companies that are based in Central, South America to even Asia, all of a sudden they have an opportunity to, you know, the top people, I can bring them into the country and give them an opportunity to work in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, versus they wouldn't have that. And vice versa, the people here also have the opportunity to go to Machu Picchu because that's on their punch list, go to Singapore, it's super exotic. Once all those kind of minimum criteria is set, then we start talking about what's a deal structure look like, what are they looking for, and then we have alignment around interest in terms of profitability, earnout, can they grow, do they have a track record. The last thing I want to do is come in and mess something up that's not working. But what I can do is, similar to EO, create a forum-like environment, best practices, thought leadership, bring people together, and that's my bigger vision. You know, we're just getting started. You know, I look at what's my vivid vision, in 5 years, what's my painted picture. In 5 years, I want to be in 40 countries with companies in every single country where they're all collaborating. For example, people industry specific. So if you're in automotive, if you're in retail, CPG, higher ed, those people are talking every 2 weeks doing a huddle. Also people in the same kind of function, account managers, salespeople, hunters, farmers, whatever it is, they're also collaborating, so they're sharing best practices. In terms of the deal structure, we're looking at a combination of stock and cash. Typically it's 50% stock, 50% cash. It could be more or less depending on their growth rate. We have a holding company in Uruguay for tax reasons. We also have a holding company in Singapore. So then we use those to acquire all the digital assets, and we have Baker Tilly as our tax partner to do all this for us.
Excellent.
Are you actively out there pitching, raising money in other channels?
Yes and no. I mean, this is my first pitch, I would say, for Atypical Digital. I do have a broker-dealer, an exclusive agreement with a YPO member. He's got his own family office, so any interest that I get here today, I would just pass to him. Okay.
And then when you're in 40 countries in 5 years, are you a publicly traded company? Are you privately held? Okay, so you want to go back to the markets, public markets again. Okay.
And that's because, again, I go back to the talent and the people, the human capital. It's all about alignment. I don't, and this is my personal perspective, is that I don't want to give phantom stock to a bunch of employees and they have no exit and they don't know what it's worth. That's the problem I have with it. Versus if you're publicly traded, I would much rather sell to the individuals and say, listen guys, we're at the beginning of building a multi-billion-dollar company. Would you rather go work for Adobe, SAP, Oracle, all of Sapient, WPP, Ogilvy? They're already multi-billion dollars or $20 billion enterprises versus let's start at the ground floor and build an amazing company with amazing culture together. And that's really the pitch. And it's not for everyone. Some people want to sell and be out and they're serial entrepreneurs, they want to move on. But I'm looking at building a different type of organization that's more aligned and we're all rowing in the same direction versus our competitors. There's a lot of cannibalism, there's people switching jobs, there's, it's a different interest.
Of your business?
Domestically, we're 21 million. If I include all the subsidiaries, we're closer to 30.
And so what do you think it needs to be? Back it up. There's a public company now. I just saw it at the Canaccord Growth Conference in Boston a couple months ago that's identical to what you're talking about, like in terms of rolling up these types of things. I mean, it might be a little bit more ad tech than it is maybe in the consulting services side. They've really struggled with getting market recognition for it. And I don't know if it's because it doesn't have the growth rate or what the kind of core issue is, but outside of, is there some way that your formula takes these companies and can accelerate growth? Because as we know, public equity investors buy growth, right? And so what's the way that you grow a service business in a way that's meaningful for public equity markets if you have to keep raising money?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the economic climate. It depends on the competitors. No one's staying still. I'm not sure about the ad tech company. What I found is that if we're able to build mind share with our customers, so let me back up a second. How we actually work with our customers is typically doing a digital maturity assessment. We say, where's your digital maturity? Because every organization has a different level of maturity from a digital perspective. Some are very competent at a website, some have a mobile site, some are better at email campaigns, some have nothing at all. So first we go and we say, well, which areas are you doing well, which ones are you not? And then we do an analysis of their website, their mobile, just their whole marketing presence, right? So then we look at what's missing and what can we do. And as soon as we are able to demonstrate we can deliver, then they want to do more work with us. So typically a contract starts with a $300,000 deal, then $500,000, then ST Micro is one of our largest customers. We do about $4.5 million just with one customer. Then the question becomes concentration. How much risk is one customer? But fortunately, not any one of our customers are more than 20%. I think our largest is about 15%. So that itself presents a risk. In terms of how do you scale a people business, right, without adding more bodies? And the answer to that is by being super opportunistic, looking for the right opportunity. So I don't think of us as a purely people HR play, meaning that if you look at Uber, is that a service company or is that a product company? Well, they have an app, it's great, but people are agnostic to Uber versus Lyft. They don't really care, they just want to go from point A to point B. So in terms of, it is an app, but it's still very service oriented because you need the driver. So what I do is I look for opportunities where one of our customers is Behr Paint. They're the #1 paint supplier of Home Depot. And one of the things we built for them is augmented reality, because the first thing that you do when you buy a house or an apartment or whatever it is you have all white walls and you want to paint the walls. Well, wouldn't it be great if you had an app, you can point it at the wall, and this technology is here now, but 3 years it wasn't.
Okay, so you bring them ideas.
We bring them ideas and we double down on that. Yeah, absolutely.
How much EBITDA do you have on the 30 million?
11%.
11%. And is that, any of that $30 million, is that actually ad buying in terms of it, or is it all
so we separate out operating versus our ad buying is about 10% on the media side. So we're not in the media.
10% into revenue, basically.
Yeah, correct. So we do the gross and we do the net revenue.
And so you create these efficiencies in terms of offshore development or other areas like that across kind of this portfolio of services.
Because the cost of labor is $500 or $600 a month per person, it's almost an eight times factor.
How much margin increase do you think you get from applying that to another $100 million of acquisition revenue that you do? I guess it depends on where you're doing the acquisition.
Yeah, right now we're about 40%. I think we can probably up our gross margin off the operating revenue up to about 45%. But I think where the real economies of scale comes in is the more things we're able to offer. For example, if we acquire a marketing automation company, an email campaign company, e-commerce, all these things, all of a sudden we're able to offer more suite of services, which increases the margin. In terms of the other economies of scale that comes in is that as we represent these global brands, for example, we have Burger King, we have Domino's Pizza, BMW, Maserati, all these companies that I'm acquiring already have them as customers. Now all of a sudden I can go back to the parent franchisee and say, hey, guess what? We represent 6 countries that have your brand, let's run a global campaign. So all of a sudden the value proposition is a lot larger. And then and it's super competitive, we're not the only players doing this, but I think the difference is that the bigger players such as Accenture, Deloitte, IBM, HCL, Infosys, all the big players, they're looking at deals that are 5 million or higher. Our deal size is about 2 million. So then who are our real competitors? These are the niche players. But the problem with the niche players is that they only do one thing really well. They're a one-trick pony, whereas we're actually acquiring the talent. Plus on top of that, we also give opportunity to the up-and-coming younger generation, the millennials. Now they have the ability to travel to our different offices and learn, and it's a culture play as well.
Good deal. Angel Sharks, you need time for one more question?
Why is that? You got 5 million raise? What does that get us? 5 million in the deck? What were you
Correct, 5 to 10 million from a debt mezzanine.
Okay. And what's the return?
It's all negotiated, right? If you want me to throw out the first number, 6.5%.
Okay.
Over 7 years, interest only. We got a deal?
No.
Any deals being done today? Okay. What's your counter? That's my anchoring. So there's also a difference in terms of anchoring, so that's my anchor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Tejune. Good job.
Thank you.